How's it going, everybody? My name's Carpo. This video is going to be about addiction, drug treatment, AA, and the fallacies that surround this whole area. I'd like to start off by saying that addiction is not a disease, at least not in the traditional sense. Alcoholism is not inherited, and it is not genetic, and this has to end. The idea that we continue to believe these things. There is absolutely no evidence whatsoever to show that addiction is inherited from your parents or from anyone in your family. If someone in your family line has an addiction, you may be more predisposed to be addicted yourself. But what we're finding is that it is the behavioral traits that cause the addiction, and not an addiction that is genetically passed on to someone. You cannot become an alcoholic and create a gene for alcoholism and pass it on. There's a lot of contention, there's a lot of argument and debate in the medical community about a lot of things, but I think this is one that we can all agree on. The reason why I'm making this video is because of all the thousands of videos that I've made over the years. I've talked about addiction, I've talked about substances, but I haven't really talked about treatment. And it's something that should be near and dear to me because I've been forced to go to treatment by the system in the past. Twice, actually 3 times. It's something that maybe I've just kept to myself because it's become so ingrained in my life. It's something that I've chosen to forget. But I'd like to start off by saying that treatment centers do not work. And the current American system of how we treat addiction does not work. And I am more than open to any evidence to the contrary. If anyone wants to show me evidence of statistics that show that treatment centers are any better than just home care and family understanding, I'd be glad to look at them. But here's what we have. When I was younger, first off, I was forced to go to treatment when I was about 20 years old because I got busted with a couple pot plants. At that time, I had no problem in my life. I was doing well. I was happy and content. And somebody ratted me out for having a couple of my first pot plants. I got busted with them, and that was a felony. That was enough to put me on probation. During the probation, I got a drug test. It came out positive for cannabis, and so I was told that I had a problem. I was told I had to go to a treatment center. And by the end, I had to do an outpatient treatment program that was 3 times a week. Leave work early every day and drive out to this place to listen to all these people mumble and complain about their past addictions, but really just waiting to go home. And nobody wanted to be there because it was court mandated. So one of the things I learned in that time is I was forced to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And they said, well, you can go to NA. They really didn't care. The system doesn't care. They say, well, you've been caught doing a substance that's illegal, therefore you must have an addiction or a problem. You must go to treatment. So I was forced to go to AA. Now, for the first couple times I actually went, and I realized how miserable it was to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. So I forged the rest of some of the documents, or at least the AA slips, or, didn't stay for the whole thing, whatever it may be. There was no way I was going to sit and listen to these war stories from people who are addicted to treatment, who are addicted to Alcoholics Anonymous rather than alcohol at that point. But in the class I was in, I was the only one that was there for cannabis. I think one other person out of like 25 was there for cannabis. Now, I don't want to go too much into my story because it's not really relevant to the point, but I wanted to say that I've been through a couple programs and I know exactly where they end up. I've been to court-mandated treatment programs, and if you don't want to go and you have no intention of being part of that, then it's not going to help you in any way, shape, or form. And if you didn't have an addiction to begin with, then it's definitely not going to help you in any way, shape, or form. The one thing that Alcoholics Anonymous does that I find appalling is it tells you the first step is to admit that you are powerless over your addiction, and only a higher power can cure you from it. This has to go by the wayside. If you're a religious person, I can understand how you could take this as gospel, no pun intended. But you have to realize that if something is going to work for a majority of people, it cannot put your powerlessness as the very first step. But it has more to do with the individual ego of the person than it does to do with any religious connotation. It has to do with you are giving a person the idea that they have no power over their own addiction. And this is just nonsense. I have been through several what people may call addictions in my life, but really it was just a period of time where I was consuming something. And what I've realized over the years is that when I quit these things, it wasn't something that I tried to quit or made a big deal about or went to treatment for. It just faded away from my interest because I had better things to do with my life. Addiction is not for life. And what AA tells you is that, and what treatment centers tell you is that if you've consumed a substance and you've been addicted to it, you can never use it again. And the minute you believe that, you're being suckered into a mindset that says that you are not in control of your own behaviors. And as much as that may be true for some people, I think for a majority it's not true at all. And it's complete bullshit. And it's taking away your own power. Basically, Alcoholics Anonymous and many of these treatment centers promote the PTSD, that it's a post-traumatic stress disorder that you need to overcome. And what ensues is a victimhood. The idea that I've been through this treatment. I've been through this addiction. Therefore, look at me. You know, I've suffered. I've suffered through this disease. And I'm sorry to say, but that's just a horrible way to look at it, in my opinion. And of course, this is all just my opinion. I'm not. And I understand there will be somebody out there watching this, guaranteed at least one person who's stewing, thinking, bullshit. AA worked for me. Treatment centers worked for me. It was the greatest thing I ever did in my life. And I say that's great. What we can't say is that treatment doesn't work for everybody. What we can say is that it's exorbitant, overly expensive, and it's not treating the actual root problems. In other words, going to a 30-day treatment center isn't going to give you the long-term care that you need, which is the main issue. When we go to a new environment and an inpatient treatment center, we feel something new, it's different, it's a novelty. The minute we're back in our own environment, we're back in the same exact problems. And not only that, but these treatment centers cost a fortune, you know. And before I made the video, I thought, well, I'll just, you know, I was going to make one. I was going to say, well, treatment centers could be $50,000 for a 30-day thing. And I thought, well, that's a little high. Maybe I should do my research. So I looked it up. And the very first one I find is Passages Malibu. No, it's not 50 grand. It's $80,000 for a 30 days in a treatment center. But that's only if you want the standard room. If you want the good room, it's $111,000 for 30 fucking days. And pardon my language, but this is just ridiculous. If you want the cheaper one, which they promote as, oh, the other one, is like only 50 grand for 30 days. And I know people who have sent their kids and their family members to some of these treatment programs and spent ridiculous amounts, even 10 grand for 30 days, even 5 grand for 30 days. It's just outrageous because all these people need is connection and understanding in their lives. They need community, family, because this is what we're learning addiction is. I'll wait for the ambulance to finish what he has to do. Seems like every time I make a video there's an ambulance, but I like to make videos outside. So anyhow, that's just real life. That is what it is. Basically, treatment centers give you punitive they will even punish you and make you feel like you're useless, worthless. And some of them are super extreme, but here's the thing, we are told to abstain forever from anything that we've consumed. Not just that, we're told to abstain forever from anything. From anything. That if you become an alcoholic, you cannot never smoke marijuana. If you've been a pot addict, you can never drink alcohol. These kinds of things. So we're telling people that they're diseased, that they're flawed, that they're worthless, and that they really need these people to help get them back on their feet. Well, your self-esteem gets crushed. And when that happens, you've lost the one thing that you need to really overcome your addiction, which is your self-esteem. The ability to know that you have more power than you thought you did. That, yes, you can overcome this and look back on it and say, whoa, I didn't even realize I had a problem there. It's not something that you need to rush and force yourself into. You need to find the root causes of why we feel the way we do. And I You're sitting here looking, somebody might be saying, look at this stoner hippie dude. It's all his jewelry on. He takes kratom. Says he's a pot smoker. He takes psychedelics. This guy's just an addict trying to justify himself and trying to, the denial excuse. I really could care less if people feel that way, because I know it's not true. But I also understand this is what the system has forced on us. Make us believe that if you dare speak against addiction as being a disease or treatment centers, then you're somehow in denial. And this is a great fallacy, but it doesn't work. It's not true. It's not reality. It was only a few years back when I was forced by the court to go to an 8-hour course on drugs and how much they damage society. And I remember telling the kid who was running the place, because his mom ran it, and he was like this 20-year-old kid who knew nothing about drugs, just a complete moron, on his fucking phone the whole time, texting while the movie was playing, not interacting with the class or giving a damn. And I thought, okay, so my tax dollars are going to this place to pay for me to come here for 8 hours and sit here. And I told the guy, I said, you watch, pot will be legal in this state in a few years. He said, no way, you mark my words, it'll never happen. It was like, this is the problem. The rest of society wants to move forward, says, well, just because you consume a substance doesn't mean you're an addict. But anyone who's had an addiction or a problem with a substance comes back crushing it. The same way that people attack me when I talk about kratom, there's always one guy who says, nobody told me how addictive kratom was, and I was taking 50 grams a day and I had to quit, and I quit out of the blue, and all of a sudden I felt crappy for a few days. I'm like, you're a dumbass, I'm sorry, but educate yourself. You live in the real fucking world. Any substance you take for a long period of time at high doses that you quit all of a sudden, yeah, you're going to feel symptoms, but, why dwell on that? So many substances have that issue. You can quit caffeine and have a headache for days. It's not a matter of the drug, it's a matter of how much do you consume, how often, and for what purpose do you consume it. For example, I don't drink or smoke pot to escape my problems, but rather to enhance my life at certain times. I'm in the evening, I'm enjoying myself, It's nobody else's business but mine. But society deems that to be an addiction. And so let them. But it doesn't generally matter unless you're forced to go to treatment. And once you've been through that, a court-mandated treatment program like I have twice, you can say fuck the system and fuck their court-appointed bullshit, because it's basically damaging people instead of helping them. I didn't meet a single person in any of my classes or courses that was actually helped out by this. So the whole tough love thing fails. And then we're told to abstain forever from anything. It makes us victims. Some people, it makes them victims. Oh, I was an addict. And other people, pious. Well, you should never consume anything because I'm clean and sober. These are like the straight edgers in metal or in punk, that kind of stuff. I don't give a shit if you don't do drugs. I don't give a shit if you feel a certain way about things. You don't have to tell everybody about it, just do what you do. And that's how I've always felt about it. But one thing that we find is that people get addicted to treatment. People get addicted to AA. When I had to go to that class, I remember seeing a guy who said he only drank for a year or two, but he's been in AA for like 20 years. And I thought, here's a guy who spent 2 years of his life doing something, and he's become addicted to this class. It was never about the alcohol. He just wants to belong. He could easily trade that for family and friends, but he may not have that. And so this is why it does work for some people and not for others. Many of the people that I met that were successful in those groups were the ones that really didn't have any family or friends. And so having a group to come together with is great, but making it court mandated and tax dollars pay for it is not great. A lot of people bring up the study about how, with addiction, about rats and cocaine, and how when the rats, there was a study done in the 60s where the rats would choose cocaine over food over and over until they killed themselves. And they said, look what addiction will kill you. Somebody redid that study, in recent decades. Instead of having 1 or 2 rats, they put in a community of rats and gave them everything they wanted, and the cocaine. And guess what? They chose the food and the community, and they didn't even touch the cocaine. It's never about the drug. It's about your interaction with life. And we're just, we can't seem to get that through into the paradigm and into the treatment paradigm because of the fact that there's so much money tied up in $100,000 a month. That's over $1 million a year for a treatment center. What kind of preposterous bullshit is this? Now, it's one thing. I'd like to say there's nothing wrong with treatment centers for the people that want to use them. And as long as tax dollars pay nothing for them, I'm totally content with that. But we need to work on personal interactions. We need to talk more about our emotional states rather than just saying, tough love, stop doing this drug. It just doesn't work that way. We can be addicted to drugs, to money, earning money. We can be addicted to shopping. We can be addicted to fame, food, love, attention. People get addicted to gambling, to sex, FAP, the whole masturbation community that I was totally unaware of until recently, until somebody brought it up. People get addicted to everything. And that's partially, genetic, because of the way that humans in general have been taught to seek novelty, but also we're genetically predisposed to seek novelty. But it's a matter of how do we control it, and we allow society to define what an addiction is, which is complete BS. So the one key ingredient to overcoming these things without treatment centers is to rewire your pathways, which means that you have to find something else to fill your time, to give you that dopamine rush, to feel good about life. So it's as simple as most people who say they were successful say they swapped out their addiction with taking a walk or doing something else. It's something we have to do if we really want to overcome it, because it's our environment that causes the addiction and it increases over time. So what it is, if it is a disease at all, which is dis-ease, it's a dis-ease of free will. It's a dis-ease of our ability to control ourselves because we're no longer content with our environment. And just because you consume something doesn't mean you're an addict. That's very important. I want to get that definitely out there. Here's the one thing you'll run into, and the one thing that somebody's bound to say in the comment section. Well, all of this is just denial. Denial is that word that everyone uses when you say, well, I'm not addicted, I just enjoy using this substance. Oh, you're in denial. I heard that so many times in the treatment classes, I just learned to ignore it. Denial means basically you can't understand how my mind works, so I must be just like you. And it just doesn't work that way. People are very complicated. Our reasons for doing anything we do are very complicated. So, if you want to look at just how bad these things can get, these drug treatment groups, look at Synanon, Synanon. Synanon was basically one man's invention of a group that came out of the fact that AA, they needed a Synanon, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, or Al-Anon. Then you have Narconon or whatever. But you have these different groups. This was supposed to be a group where all addicts could come together. This was in the 60s. And it became like a cult. And they had no passion for the people that came in. It was like if you came in and you were withdrawing, you were just thrown on a couch to puke all over the place, and you were treated like shit. It's reconditioning, and this is what we are still doing. It's brainwashing, and that's what treatment centers are still today. It's no different than that. It's a brainwashing. So the only two things that I have to contribute as far as the solution to the problem is, first, stop using tax money and court referrals for treatment centers. Right now, completely off the board. There's no studies that show that treatment centers are any better than placebo, and they have no long-term benefits. Second, make sure that we learn that recovery starts at home, and it's important that the families and the friends help to encourage and help the people. And I guess number 3 would be to rewire your pathways, like I said, which means find something else to do. And don't beat yourself up just because you may have a drink once in a while or you smoke a joint sometimes. You are the one who can determine what your problems are, as long as your life is not suffering. And remember, addiction is defined as something that you do regularly which causes problems in your life because of it. If you just smoke a bowl with your friends, that's not an addiction just because you have it. It may be a compulsion, it may be a habit. But knowing the difference between habit and addiction is crucial. But ultimately, it's just words. Really, you have to realize it comes down to we're living a complicated life, we're doing our best to cope with it, and sometimes we overthink or underthink the situation. So hopefully this helps someone somewhere, but more it's just to call out bullshit on the treatment centers and on the current paradigm of treatment for addiction, if you will. So, talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Make sure you stay safe, and I'm definitely not belittling or minimizing true addiction. I know addiction. I know addicts, I should say. I've seen people go downhill, and I know how bad it can get. I get this. But treating everyone in the same homogenized group as anyone who consumes as an addict is not productive for anyone. So, I'll talk to y'all later. Have a good one.